So if you've followed my channel for a long time, you know that I don't shy away from discussing, touchy topics, stuff that's toxic or difficult or complicated. But this is a topic that has been getting a lot of play in the media through Pizzagate, through Epstein, through Boys Town, the conspiracy of silence, through Jerry Sandusky. It's something that's come up and it's in a lot of conspiracy theories, and it's been a topic that it's been really muddled, right? We have all these competing ideas about, rehabilitation, about natural desires. What do you do when someone naturally is attracted to somebody who's a minor? What do you do when you have a minor who wants to transition and become the opposite sex? And what's the big deal if they want to identify as an older person? Shouldn't that then be, substantiated? And I think all of this is the result of entrenched power structures in our country that use their power for self-interest to alter the narrative. And I think that the best way to look at it, to really simplify the entire equation, is to realize that every single policy, every single act, every single person in this country can be divided into two categories: pro-pedophilia and anti-pedophilia. And that's it. It's really that simple. And anyone who doesn't want to go by that binary for every single question, regardless of the topic, well, those people are pro-pedophilia, right? So when you have people who are pro-pedophilia, they want to confuse things and make it sound like it's complicated and there's issues and there's things that aren't related to pedophilia. And those people, again, are pro-pedophilia. So let's look at a couple issues and illustrate this point. Let's look, for instance, at an issue like universal health care. Now, the question you have to ask is, would universal health care help pedophiles? And the answer is yes. Universal health care would provide health care to pedophiles. Therefore, universal health care is pro-pedophilia. But we don't want to be pro-pedophilia because that would be bad. I mean, that sounds really bad, so you don't want to be pro-pedophilia. So we need to be anti-pedophilia. And the way you are anti-pedophilia is by opposing universal health care. Another really good example is the death penalty. Now, when you have the death penalty, you can execute pedophiles. If you can't execute pedophiles, that's pro-pedophilia. So anyone who opposes the death penalty is pro-pedophilia. And it's really that simple. Now, I know that there are people out there who will say that there's lots of nuance and there's issues that aren't necessarily binary like that, and that not everything can be broken down to such a simplistic unidimensional scale, and that's completely arbitrary, and that you're pigeonholing and forcing things into contexts that don't make sense. And the thing to realize is that those people are pro-pedophilia because they are resisting the pro-pedophilia, anti-pedophilia dichotomy, which is the only dichotomy through which, the only lens through which that you can look at any problem. And you see that there's a lot of people who resist this idea, and they'll argue against it, and they'll say all kinds of things that they'll pretend are like logic and pretend are reasonable. But again, those people, they're not being anti-pedophiles, because anti-pedophiles would accept the pro-pedophilia, anti-pedophilia dichotomy, and those people are not doing that. So we can look at all the laws and be like, are these laws pro or anti-pedophilia? And if you don't agree, then you are a pro-pedophilia person. And I'm not saying that to insult anyone. It's not like I'm not saying that you're a pedophile, you're actually a pedophile. I'm just saying that you're pro-pedophilia, right? And anyone who disagrees with me on any issue is pro-pedophilia. And it's not personal. Everyone's had pro-pedophilia ideas at one point or another when they didn't agree with me, right? Anytime they don't agree with me, they're pro-pedophile. Anytime they do agree with me, they're an anti-pedophile. And you don't want to be a pedophile. You want to be an anti-pedophile. So the thing to do is to agree with me on every topic. And it may seem like this is a metric or a rubric that maybe doesn't apply to everything. But again, if you look at the research that I did in my 300-page book with big spaces and big letters and lots of mistakes and really bad scholarship, you will know that everything can be seen through this lens. You can look and be like, oh, this person is saying all these logical things that are alleging that a certain issue may not be related to pedophilia. What those people are really doing is trying to be pro-pedophilia. What those people are trying to do is hide the truth, that what the real problem is is pro-pedophilia laws. So again, we can look at the laws. Here's another good one, climate change. If we fix the climate and we allow the earth to be prosperous, that will help pedophiles. We don't want to do that. We want the climate to change so that the pedophiles will get heat stroke and die. So anyone who is for climate changing and getting worse, they're anti-pedophilia, and they're good. We want that. Anyone who wants to keep the climate not changing, right? Of course, those people are pro-pedophilia because they want pedophiles to live on this planet. And that's another way to look at it. In a way, if you're pro-human, if you're like not a misanthrope, you are, in a sense, pro-pedophilia because pedophiles are, after all, humans. So the only true anti-pedophilic position is to be a misanthrope and to think that all humans should die. And I think that we really need to understand this when we look through history. And so we can use this as a metric to look at our historical past and look at our historical leaders and say, yes, all of them basically are pro-pedophilia unless and until they say something that I agree with, in which case they become anti-pedophilia that very moment. Now, the other thing, too, that sometimes comes up is people will point out, well, you're not being consistent and your position has changed. Some people sometimes will say stuff like, you used to believe that pedophiles were aliens and that they came from another planet when you were in college and that therefore you must be a complete idiot. And those people, again, are being pro-pedophilia because they are criticizing somebody who is an anti-pedophile, right? If you're anti an anti, then you're the thing, right? If you're an anti-pedophile, then you're a pro-pedophile. It's really simple. And that's what's the beauty of the system. It's so simple than even a complete moron who got into his position just because people were afraid that he would call them a pedophile can make a career out of it. So I think that this is a really worthwhile topic, and anyone out there who disagrees with me, who criticizes me, those people are pedophiles. And the other thing is, I'm so assured, I'm so correct on this that I don't think that I should ever have to debate this with anyone. A lot of times for years I've been talking about this, and people have come to me and said, "Hey, this is a big problem. Pedophilia is a big problem." And I was like, "Hey, I'll take care of it. I know the answer to this. I know the solution to this." And the solution is to just call everyone I don't agree with a pedophile. And then when they challenge me, I'll call them a pedophile again, or at least a pro-pedophile, which, yes, they're not actually a pedophile. They're just allies of pedophiles and enabling pedophiles, and therefore just as guilty as pedophiles, right? If you aid and abet somebody in doing something evil, then you're just as evil as they are. Even if you say that's not what you're doing and there's no actual connection, again, you're using logic, and logic helps pedophiles. So logic is pro-pedophilia, and anti-pedophilia means a lack of logic. Okay, it's very, very simple. And so then what happens is people are afraid that they realize they don't want to be seen as pro-pedophilia, and so then they give me lots of money. And that is the true anti-pedophilic thing to do, is to give me lots of money and to give me praise and to give me a platform to talk about my anti-pedophilia. And if they don't, then they're pro-pedophilia, and they don't want that, obviously. So in their self-interest, they will then help me spread the dogma of anti-pedophilia. Now, that's very interesting because some people could point out, well, I thought you said that pro-pedophilia came from self-interest, and there was self-interested people who spread pro-pedophilia to help their pedophilia. Those people who are trying to show the logical connection there and the hypocrisy, those people, are pedophiles. So, excuse me, and I'm not saying that to insult. When I call someone a pedophile over and over again, or a pro-pedophile, I'm not insulting them. Everyone makes mistakes. I'm just correctly labeling their position, right? It's not passive aggressive. It's not me trying to slander anyone. I'm just saying, look, your position is pro-pedophilia because you don't agree with me. And I, after all, wrote the book on being anti-pedophilia. Like, literally. I wrote the book on being anti-pedophilia. And so if you don't agree with me, you are therefore, by definition, a pedophile. Or at least pro-pedophile. But again, there's no really difference there. It's the same thing. And if you think there is a distinction and you start to make all these little allegations about this or that, or logical connections or empirical facts, then that is something that a pedophile would do, and you're being pro-pedophilia. So I think that this has been a big problem. There's been, 400 years of pedophilia launched on this country. And if you go and you look at the historical record and you pick out every single example of pedophilia, you can then realize that all of history is just pro-pedophilia happening the entire time, everywhere. Now, it doesn't count as pro-pedophilia in other countries and other places that I don't have any influence on. So yes, you might find references like to legitimate like pedophilia in places like the Arab world or in China or in Southeast Asia, but those examples don't count. The only examples that count are the pedophilic examples that started in the late 1400s and went up until the 1860s. All the other examples, they don't matter, and anyone who thinks that they do, they're trying to confuse things, and those people are being pro-pedophile, and they should be anti-pedophile. And they might say, well, you're cherry picking and you're just going through and just finding specific examples through a huge 500-year or 600-year section of history, and you're ignoring all the other evidence and just trying to construct a narrative. And that is very much something that a pedophile would say, to hide what they're doing. So that's basically, the point. And, fortunately, no one disagrees with me openly. I don't allow them to, right? If they try and debate me, those people who try and debate me, imagine that. I'm an anti-pedophile. If you want to debate me, what does that make you? That makes you pro-pedophile. So why would you do that? The only reason you'd be willing to debate an anti-pedophile is because you are pro-pedophile. So I don't even need to back that up any more than I already have. So right now, I'm just waiting to, enjoy the accolades that I deserve from society, and I'm just going to wait until everything happens exactly the way that I want, and then, go on to the next topic. But yeah, it's been very clarifying to see the world in this way. And for those out there who think that it's more complicated than that, or that there's details and there's nuance and that there's lots of contravening data and there's other scholarship that points in other directions and that there's logical inconsistencies, all these things, again, those people are obviously pro-pedophile, and you really want to listen to them. Anyway, thank you all very much for listening, and I'll talk to you all later.